Michael Bay is Hollywood's go-to director for movies filled with big explosions, cringe-worthy dialogue, mostly terrible acting, and predictable plots. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's bad. I mean, he's probably not gonna win Best Picture anytime soon, but when have the crusty old Oscars ever gotten anything right? Bay might get lumped in as being big and brainless, but it does take skill to be as big and brainless as his films are, and I mean that as a genuine compliment. The director knows they're gratuitous and bonkers without remorse, and it's hard to deny that his films, no matter how insane or just plain awful, are damn entertaining because of it. Well, most of them are. There is a reason the director has a bad reputation after all, but whether they're laughably bad, so bad they're good, or actually quite genuinely great, Bay's back catalogue is all worth talking about. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is every Michael Bay movie ranked worst to best. Number 14, Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. The first of Bay's live-action Transformers sequels takes all the good parts of its predecessor and throws them out the window. Running for 2.5 hours, Revenge of the Fallen is the most poorly plotted and inexcusable part of Bay's entire filmography. Returning lead actors Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, and Josh Duhamel may as well not be there, as the film has focused too much on special effects and making as many senseless action sequences as possible. With no characters able to give the film any heart, Bay's usual crude off-base humour feels even worse as well. The effects, in part, are impressive and perhaps the film's only saving grace. At least, that's for the first 10 minutes or so. After that, it's a shambolic onslaught of CGI and fire, with little comprehension for the subject matter or the characters brought to life in the first film. Number 13, Pearl Harbor. Released in 2001, Pearl Harbor is a tin pot Titanic from start to finish. With its excessive runtime, somewhere Bay falls down an awful lot on, and some staggeringly poor career-low performances from Ben Affleck, Kate Beckinsale, and Josh Hartnett, it remains one of cinema's most ham-fisted attempts at a wartime drama. The romance between Affleck, Hartnett, and Beckinsale was full to exploding with bad dialogue and forced interactions, as if the actors were being held at gunpoint during filming or something, and the lack of charm with the usually decent talent involved made the whole spectacle plod and bump along right until its predictable ending. The saving grace, because every Bay film does have one somewhere, is the extended action sequence detailing the Pearl Harbor attacks, which is classic Michael Bay goodness. Unfortunately, the rest of the film around it, promising to be a wartime Titanic, quickly sinks. Number 12, Transformers: The Last Knight. The last of Michael Bay's Transformers series is only slightly better than its very worst outing. As ever, it falls flat at over 2 hours, and whilst the special effects and constant stream of explosions make for an impressive visual achievement, they're not nearly enough to save the film from failure. Despite brief and underused acting spots, The Last Knight suffers from the same things all Bay's Transformers films suffer from: an incoherent plot, tough-to-follow action scenes, poor characterization, and tasteless humor. The last in a lackluster at best series, The Last Knight does nothing to detract the critics of its predecessors. In fact, as a whole, it's the final nail in the coffin. Number 11, Transformers: Age of Extinction. I know I keep harping on about it, but at 165 minutes long, Age of Extinction suffers more than any of Michael Bay's other films because of its insane and frankly unnecessary runtime. That said, the Dinobots here are quite cool if completely nuts, and Stanley Tucci manages to bring a lot to the table as ruthless businessman Joshua Joyce. This one is very serviceable, but it feels a bit like Bay on autopilot at times. The urgency ebbs away, and what you're left with is a tensionless action film with no heart, no drive, and no hook. On paper, pushing forward after the original trilogy of films was a bad idea, and on screen it was even worse. Number 10, Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Bay's third Transformers outing is one of his better efforts, with Dark of the Moon being a breath of fresh air after the dismal Revenge of the Fallen. It's still fast-paced and filled with enough explosions to level a city, but Dark's action sequences are much more effective than Bay's other flicks. The main problem with the film, of course, is the plot. A touch convoluted, the actual story is quite forgettable, and stays up simply because of a frankly ridiculous supporting cast. Visually though, it is the best in the series, and Dark is an impressive technical achievement, but it sadly lacks any kind of exciting plot to raise it higher on this list. Number 9, Six Underground. Despite having a lot of classic Bayisms, Six Underground is a bit of an odd one out when it comes to the director's other work. Not quite unhinged enough to be a proper stinker, but lacking the heart to elevate it to anything beyond good. Following a team of 6 people from around the world who have faked their deaths in order to save the world from the worst of humanity, the film stars Ryan Reynolds along Melanie Laurent, Ben Hardy, and Corey Hawkins, and is admittedly a whole load of fun. It is ridiculously violent as well, to the extent where this video probably can't do do it justice and does draw up some seriously likable characters, but there's little original in here when you dive deep. It's bare let loose on a streaming service and propped up to 11, which does make for a good watch, but it's also one where you can tell that the director is colouring between the lines. Number 8. Transformers. As we begin to dig into the truly good and even great parts of Michael Bay's filmography, we find his first Transformers hit is still the best of the series. Despite some character redesigns and some apprehension about what kind of film it would end up being, Transformers broke many people's expectations at the time, and for obvious reasons. Coming out in 2007, the effects were dazzling and the action fun. Shia LaBeouf is on stellar form as well, layering the action with a solid grasp of his character and his comedic ability. And unlike the others in the series, this first outing actually has an easy to follow and rather effective plot. A goofy, silly sci-fi action epic, Transformers remains a solid addition to the franchise. Number 7. The Island. Bay's last film before he took a stab at bringing a live-action Transformers series to life, The Island is a forgotten sci-fi thriller about a man played by Ewan McGregor and a woman played by Scarlett Johansson who live on an island, hence the title, unable to leave it because the world outside is apparently dead. Whilst the first half is a mysterious piece of science fiction building up to some big reveal, the second half puts its foot down and turns into a remarkably exciting, action-packed thriller. Both halves work off each other surprisingly well, and a solid villain portrayal from Sean Bean. This is one that took a kicking when it released, but is actually a hugely underrated effort from the director. Number 6. Armageddon. Armageddon might be Michael Bay's most insane and enjoyable popcorn flick. Completely daft in terms of plot and character, this disaster epic is arguably the most fun thing the director has ever done, even if it makes no sense. Telling the story of a group of rough oil drillers who are sent into space to dig into an incoming asteroid and plant a bomb within it before it can hit Earth, Armageddon is not exactly winning any prizes for Idea of the Year. But the logic doesn't really matter when you can tell the director truly believes in the characters and emotions he's bringing to life. Bay buys it, and hell, that makes it easy for you to buy it as well. Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, and Liv Tyler were pretty spotty in their roles, but thanks to supporting turns from Steve Buscemi, Will Patton, William Fichtner, and Michael Clarke Duncan, as well as some emotional twists and some decent effects, the insane premise papers over a lot of the obvious weaknesses to make for a pretty thorough good time. Number 5. 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. Michael Bay's 2016 action flick 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi is the director at his most considerate and character-driven for better and worse. A much tamer film than nearly everything else in his filmography, you'd be forgiven for thinking that 13 Hours was actually made by someone else, which is what makes it so noteworthy. With a focus on 6 soldiers who must band together to protect a diplomatic compound in Libya from terrorists, the film boasts a redefining performance from Office star John Krasinski and sees Bay take a slight step back from the over-the-top antics of the Transformers series. Instead of filling in the plot with explosions and off-kilter humor, 13 Hours is instead an often powerful character-driven piece of cinema, which is probably as surprising for you to hear as it is for me to say. Unfortunately though, we're not likely to see anything like this from the director again, because everyone told him to stop being so over the top and then didn't actually go out to see what he made when he complied. Number 4. Pain and Gain. Based on the true story of 3 bodybuilders who kidnapped and extorted money from a rich businessman and later killed another one, Pain and Gain is a somewhat difficult film to classify. Some people absolutely hate it, and it is easy to see why. It's Bay's loudest, most obnoxious, most button-pushing movie, and if you take that at face value, then it's easy to write it off completely. However, this might be the first time all of those traits are intentionally turned up to make a point, with this black comedy acting as a somewhat scathing portrait of American ideals. It works primarily because the cast keep it grounded, and thanks to the genuinely hysterical performances of Mark Wahlberg, Anthony Mackie, and Dwayne Johnson, it's full of some effective comedy and character interactions. A dark, appalling story about truly horrible people, Pain and Gain is Michael Bay finally finding a perfect story for his unashamed nihilism. Number 3. Bad Boys 2. A much sillier and more explosive action flick than its predecessor, Bad Boy 2's main problem stems from Bay's need to constantly outdo himself. Even when it's clear that he's at war with himself in the film though, it still makes for an endlessly entertaining experience. Bad Boys 2 is a no-holds-barred thrill ride which never lets itself take a breath, and thanks to the speed at which the film flies by, it's a really exciting, funny, and carefree action film. The true strength of the flick of course lies in the chemistry between leads Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, who work brilliantly together and drive the film forward with their playful banter and easy comedic chops. What makes it so notable though, especially watching it back now, is just how horrible and ugly the movie is. Trading in some of the heart for a hard vitriolic edge, part of Bad Boys 2's charm, if you can call it that, is how it absolutely does not care what you think in every single way, but that's also why it continues to linger in the pop culture memory. Number 2, The Rock. Michael Bay's most infamous film is every single bit as silly, over the top, and explosive as you'd expect from an action movie that stars Nick Cage and Sean Connery and is also set on Alcatraz during a hostage situation. In short, The Rock follows a mild-mannered chemist as he joins an ex-con who once escaped the notorious prison and attempts to stop a group of former soldiers from launching rockets onto San Francisco. What follows is a senseless, overacted cult classic which works because of its carefree approach to the action genre. Visually thrilling and completely wonderfully nonsensical, The Rock's brutal action sequences, comedic beats, and breathless pacing make it one of Hollywood's most enjoyable 90s action films. Everyone in it is having a good time, and that excitement is infectious. Number 1, Bad Boys. And here it is, in all of its glory. Bad Boys came out in 1995 and was Michael Bay's directorial debut, and to this day, remains his best film. Gaining a cult following since its release, Bad Boys succeeded on every front. Both Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are on top form as bickering cop partners Mike and Marcus. The villain is intimidating and effective, the action is high octane but well controlled, and the plot offers everyone involved the opportunity to show off their dramatic and comedic sensibilities. Underneath all this, Bad Boys is also much darker than any of Bay's other feature films. But this tone, mixed with some effective comedy and a solid dynamic courtesy of Smith and Lawrence, makes Bad Boys Bay's most fully formed and cohesive flick. It may be slightly cliched and even formulaic in parts, but when a film is this unabashedly fun and rewarding, it's impossible not to love it and watch it again and again and again, and then stick on Bad Boys 2 for good measure. So that's our list. Want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. How would you rank Michael Bay's films, and do you secretly enjoy him as much as I do? Honestly, I wasn't convinced until I saw a video from someone called Patrick Willems on Bayhem, and then it completely changed my mind, so definitely give these films another go if you're not entirely on board. However, while you're down there, can you also give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.